The night had just fallen and neon lights reflected off the slick pavement after a light drizzle. On the busy highways of Los Angeles, a Porsche 911 Turbo S tore through the streets like a silver lightning bolt, its engine roaring between the towering skyscrapers. Savannah Kingsley, 22 years old, the beloved daughter of Richard Kingsley, a notorious real estate mogul, glanced indifferently at her rearview mirror. She had just left an extravagant party in Beverly Hills, still buzzing from a few overpriced cocktails. As she approached an intersection near downtown, a dark figure suddenly appeared in the middle of the road. Marcus O'Neill, a homeless veteran, was struggling to push his shopping cart, his only possession, across the street. But Savannah didn't even think to slow down. A sickening thud echoed through the night. The brutal impact sent Marcus flying onto the cold concrete. His cart flipped over, spilling worn-out clothes and a few scattered belongings everywhere. Savannah flinched, but instead of stopping, she frowned at the tiny scratch on her hood through the rearview mirror. "Damn it," she muttered, completely ignoring the motionless man behind her. Without a second thought, she slammed on the gas and disappeared into the night as if nothing had happened. No one knew whether Marcus was dead or alive, but there was one thing Savannah hadn't noticed. A bystander had captured everything on their phone. That video wouldn't take long to ignite a wildfire of outrage across the country. Here's the next part of the story with more depth, tension, and emotional weight. The morning air in Los Angeles was thick with smog, but nothing was cloudier than the storm brewing on social media. Overnight, the grainy, dimly lit footage of Savannah Kingsley's hit and run had spread like wildfire. The video, shaky but unmistakable, captured every chilling second. The blinding headlights, the gut-wrenching impact, the lifeless body hitting the pavement, and Savannah's Porsche vanishing into the night. Hashtags like #JusticeForMarcus and #KingsleyPrivilege trended across every platform, fueling a public outcry that no amount of wealth could silence. Inside the Kingsley estate, a multi-million-dollar mansion nestled in the Hollywood Hills, Savannah lounged on a sleek leather sofa, scrolling through her phone. Her expression? Annoyed, not guilty. She let out a sharp sigh, tossing her device onto the marble coffee table. "This is ridiculous," she scoffed, looking at her father. "Some homeless guy jumps in front of my car, and suddenly I'm public enemy number one?" Richard Kingsley, a man whose empire was built on ruthless business tactics and political connections, swirled the whiskey in his crystal glass. He barely looked up from his morning paper. "It's not about what happened, Savannah. It's about optics. And right now, yours are a goddamn disaster." Savannah rolled her eyes. "So what? It'll blow over in a few days. It always does." But Richard knew better. He had seen the way public rage could dismantle even the most untouchable figures. A scandal like this wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a threat. He reached for his phone, dialing his lawyer. "We need to control the narrative before the DA gets involved," he said coldly. "Find a way to make this go away." Meanwhile, at Brinkhaven Memorial Hospital, Marcus O'Neill clung to life. His body was broken, ribs shattered, a punctured lung, a fractured skull, but his spirit had endured worse. A veteran who had survived combat, he now fought another battle, one where the enemy was indifference. Machines beeped rhythmically beside him, keeping him tethered to a world that had long since abandoned him. Across the city, people gathered in protest. Anger burned hotter than the California sun. News vans lined the streets outside LAPD headquarters as reporters bombarded officers with questions. Would Savannah Kingsley be arrested? Or would money, as always, buy her freedom? One thing was certain. The Kingsley name was no longer just associated with luxury and power. Now it was synonymous with injustice. Here's the continuation of your story with heightened tension, deeper emotions, and a sharper focus on injustice. The tension in Los Angeles had reached a boiling point. The streets outside the LAPD headquarters were flooded with protesters, their voices a storm of outrage. Signs demanding justice for Marcus, and no more privilege for the rich, waved above the sea of furious citizens. News anchors, with grave expressions, reported the growing unrest as the question on everyone's lips echoed through the city. Why hasn't Savannah Kingsley been arrested? The truth was simple. Money. Power. Corruption. Inside the Kingsley estate, Richard Kingsley was already several steps ahead of the justice system. His top-tier legal team had been working around the clock, scouring every legal loophole, bribing the right people, and ensuring that by the time Savannah Kingsley set foot in a courtroom, if she ever did, the case against her would be nothing more than a pile of weak, circumstantial evidence. At LAPD headquarters, Detective Jordan Hayes stared at the case file on his desk, his jaw tight with frustration. He had spent years navigating the rotten bureaucracy of the system, but this case was different. This time he wasn't just fighting against a murderer, he was fighting against the very machine that protected them. The department was under immense pressure to act, but the moment Hayes suggested issuing a warrant for Savannah's arrest, he received a warning from the top brass. This isn't just some street thug, Hayes. This is Kingsley money. Step carefully. Translation? Back off. But he wasn't going to. With a deep breath, he grabbed his coat and headed toward Brinkhaven Memorial. If the system wanted to bury this case, he would fight like hell to keep it alive. At the hospital, Marcus O'Neill lay in his bed, his breath slow and shallow. Tubes ran from his nose and arms, a machine beeped softly beside him, keeping time with the fragile thread of his life. His sister, Danielle O'Neill, sat beside him, gripping his limp hand. Danielle had always been the fighter of the family, but nothing had prepared her for this battle. She had watched the news, seen Savannah Kingsley's smug, untouched face, and felt something inside her snap. "She's walking free, Marcus," she whispered, voice shaking. "Like your life doesn't even matter." Her brother didn't move, didn't stir, but she squeezed his hand anyway. "I won't let them get away with it." Determined, Danielle stood up, wiped her tears and pulled out her phone. She opened Twitter and typed, "My brother is fighting for his life while Savannah Kingsley is sipping champagne in her mansion. If the system won't hold her accountable, we will. #Justice for Marcus." She hit send. Within minutes, the tweet exploded. And the war truly began. Here's the next intense and dramatic part of the story. The sun had barely risen over Los Angeles when Danielle O'Neill's phone began buzzing non-stop. Overnight, her tweet had gone viral. News outlets picked it up, celebrities retweeted it, and the hashtag Justice for Marcus was now the #1 trending topic. The pressure was mounting and the Kingsleys could feel it. At the Kingsley estate, Richard Kingsley paced his marble-floored office, jaw clenched as he read the latest headlines. His PR team was already drafting statements, but the court of public opinion was spiraling out of control. No carefully crafted press release could erase the image of Marcus O'Neill fighting for his life while Savannah partied in luxury. "Handle it," Richard growled into the phone. On the other end, his lead attorney, Elliot Greaves, adjusted his tie. "We're working on it. The DA is hesitant to press charges, but the police are under pressure. We may need to take more aggressive measures." Richard's eyes darkened. "Then do it." At LAPD headquarters, Detective Jordan Hayes leaned against his desk, watching the precinct buzz with tension. Since Danielle's tweet, the public demanded action, and for the first time the department wasn't just protecting the wealthy, they were trapped by them. Captain Rodriguez called Hayes into his office, his expression hard. "I hope you realize what you've done," he said, tossing a folder onto the desk. "You had to push, didn't you?" Hayes frowned and picked up the file. His stomach tightened. Inside were multiple complaints filed against him, claims of misconduct, unethical investigations, and even whispers of fabricated evidence. All of them completely false. They were trying to bury him. "This is bullshit," Hayes said, his voice low. Rodriguez sighed, rubbing his temples. "You don't get it, Hayes. Kingsley money runs deep. You keep pushing and you won't just lose your badge, you'll lose everything." Hayes clenched his fists. He had seen corruption before, but this was a full-scale cover-up. And he wasn't backing down. Across town, Danielle stood outside Brinkhaven Memorial, speaking into a megaphone. Hundreds of protesters had gathered around her, chanting Marcus's name, demanding Savannah's arrest. Reporters shoved microphones toward her as she spoke, her voice shaking with rage but unwavering. "If Marcus were rich, if he were white, if he had the Kingsley name, would we even be here today?" she demanded. "Would Savannah Kingsley still be walking free? We know the answer." The crowd roared in agreement. And then, suddenly, chaos. From the distance, several unmarked black SUVs pulled up. Men in suits emerged, pushing through the protesters, heading straight for Danielle. FBI. A tall agent with cold, gray eyes held up his badge. "Danielle O'Neill, we need you to come with us." Danielle's heart pounded. "On what grounds?" she shot back. The agent didn't flinch. "Inciting violence." The crowd erupted into angry shouts, but before anyone could react, the agents grabbed Danielle's arms and led her away. As she was shoved into the SUV, she caught a glimpse of the hospital window. Marcus was still fighting for his life. And now so was she. Danielle O'Neill sat in a cold, dimly lit interrogation room, her hands clenched into fists. The cuffs had been removed, but the tightness around her wrists remained, a cruel reminder of how far the Kingsleys were willing to go to silence her. Across from her sat Agent Thomas Calloway, A man whose sharp suit and unreadable expression did little to hide the fact that he was a weapon, not a man. Inciting violence? Danielle scoffed. That's the best you could come up with? Calloway didn't blink. Your protest turned into a riot. Danielle leaned forward, her voice sharp. No, it didn't. Your people turned it into one. A flicker of something, respect, maybe? Flashed in Calloway's gray eyes, but it was gone in an instant. He slid a folder across the table. Danielle hesitated before opening it, and when she did, her stomach dropped. Inside were doctored images, photos of her at the protest, seemingly giving orders to men smashing store windows, setting fires. A complete fabrication. This is bullshit. Calloway finally smiled. Maybe. But it's convincing. He leaned back. I'll be honest, Ms. O'Neill. The Kingsleys want you gone. I don't think they care how. Danielle's pulse pounded in her ears. She had always known this fight was bigger than just Marcus. But now they were coming for her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then they're going to have to try a lot harder. Danielle O'Neill's story serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of power abuse and the importance of standing up for the truth. In a world where those in authority are willing to twist reality to protect their own interests, courage and perseverance become the most powerful weapons. The message is clear. Justice doesn't come naturally, it must be fought for. If you face injustice, speak up. If they try to distort the truth, keep pushing for evidence. If you feel alone, remember that every movement for change begins with one person brave enough to step out of the shadows. In today's world, the truth can be manipulated, but it only prevails when someone is willing to defend it. Never stop fighting for what's right.